So we have been looking at percents and specifically at just getting an idea of what percents are and estimating with percents. But we're going to move into now being able to convert back and forth between fractions, decimals, and percents. Because really all of them are ways of expressing parts of a whole. So we need to be able to move back and forth fluently between them because in different situations we may want to use a different form of one of them and it will help to be able to know how to change them. So part of this is review. If I want to change a fraction to a decimal, we know that we're going to take the numerator and denominator and we're going to do a division. We're going to do the numerator divided by the denominator. So in an example of that, 3/8, we can do 3 divided by 8. Remember to annex a decimal and bring it up, and then annex a 0. And as you work this out, it's going to take a little bit, but it'll work out eventually. It'll work out evenly. And we're going to get 375 thousandths because there's our division. It's finally worked out evenly. So we get 375 thousandths as the decimal that 3/8 equals. And we also know how to change a decimal to a fraction. We read it as a decimal, making sure to read it properly with our place value words and such. And then we write it as a fraction because we can use our what we say to write it in fraction form. And then we reduce or simplify it. So we read, write, and reduce. So here's an example of that. Here's the decimal 0.3, but if we read that properly, remember we can also put a 1 under the decimal and a 0 under each place after to help us. That says 3/10. So we write it as the fraction 3/10. That one cannot be simplified, so it just equals the fraction 3/10. All of that should be review. So then we get into, well, how is it then that we change back and forth if one of our numbers is a percent or if we want to change to a percent? So just talking a little bit about that, if we have a percent and we want to change our percent into a decimal or into a fraction, probably it's easiest to change it to a fraction first because we know percents are out of 100. So 24% really means 24 out of 100. Now, I would want to simplify that, but before I do, it becomes really easy then to write the decimal form, 24 out of 100 or 24 hundredths. When I come back to the 24 hundredths as a fraction, I see that I can simplify that as 6/25. All right, looking though at our fraction and our decimal in the first two rows, if I want to change those into percents, that gets a little bit trickier. Now the 3/10 isn't too bad because, again, we know percents have to be out of 100, so we can think of the 3/10 as a fraction, and having it be out of, instead of having it be out of 10, we can make it out of 100. And so we can do that by multiplying here by 10, both the numerator and denominator, and that gives us 30 out of 100, or 30 hundredths, which, remember, percents are out of 100, so this number then is our percentage. So it equals 30%. We can actually use that same strategy with the 3/8. 3/8 equals what percent? Well, we need it to be out of 100, so we're looking for what number is going to be up here on top of the 100, and that's going to be our percentage. Well, we can't do 8 times anything and easily get 100, so we need to look at this one and realize we could do some cross products, 3 times 100, and then divide by our number that's left over, the 8. 3 times 100 divided by 8 is going to give us what x is. And if we actually work that out, you're going to get 37 5/10. So x is 37 5/10, so our percentage then is 37 5/10%. There's actually even an easier way to do that. I'm going to give you some examples and see if you can figure this out. So these are some examples of some decimals and what percentages they equal. Take a few minutes and look very carefully at those and see if you can figure out what the rule is going to be about how to do it, what the shortcut is. And when you think you have it figured out, then hit play. All right, now that you've had a chance to look at that, what you've hopefully seen is really all you have to do is move the decimal 2 places to the right. And when you do that, you're going to know what your percentage is. And then take a minute and look, what if I have the percentage and I want to make it a decimal? And when you look at these examples, see if you can see what you have to do. So again, let's take a look at these ones on the right-hand side and see if you can see a pattern for when we're changing a percent to a decimal, how you're going to do that. What's the shortcut? So take a minute, pause, and see if you can figure that out. All right, now that you've taken time to look at it, notice that if you think about where the decimal is in the percentage, we're just going to move the decimal 2 places to the left. And that should make sense because when you were changing a decimal to a percent, we moved 2 places to the right. So it makes sense if we're changing a percent to a decimal, we should move 2 places to the left. So just do the opposite. So that's a shortcut for how you can do these. And your question may be, why does that work? What's kind of the point? Why does that work? Well, the reason why that works is because let's take a look a little bit closer at that 85%. If you think about it for just a minute, if we want to change that to a decimal, we know that percents are out of 100. So when we put it out of 100, what we're really saying is this, which remember a fraction really can mean 85 divided by 100. Well, when you move a decimal 2 places to the left, what you really basically have done is you have divided by 100. So that's essentially what you're doing is you're taking the percentage and you're dividing it by 100, and that's giving you what your decimal would be, because it's kind of like you have taken the percentage, made it a fraction, and then done the division that the fraction says, and that gives you what your decimal is. So that's why that works when you're changing a percent to a decimal. And then changing a decimal to a percent is essentially just the opposite. So for example, 23 hundredths is going to be 23%, because you're taking it from the decimal 23 hundredths and writing it as the fraction 23 hundredths. And then you can get the percent from that. And we want to get rid of it, and we want to just know just what the top number is. So the way you're going to do that, we need to get rid of the divided by 100, is to multiply by 100. And that gives you 23. So it's 23%. And so what you've really done there, the multiplying by 100, is moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So that's why that whole trick of multiplying or of moving 2 places to the left or 2 places to the right works. It's because when you do that, you're either dividing or multiplying by 100, which is what you're doing when you're converting between decimals and percents. So take a minute now, look at these examples, and see if you can figure out what they would be if you change the percents to a decimal, and then if you change the decimals to a percent. Hit pause while you're doing it, and then hit play when you're ready to check your answers. All right, so here's what your answers should be. 23% is 23 hundredths, 8% equals 8 hundredths, 90% equals 9 tenths or 90 hundredths. You could put the 0 after it, it wouldn't matter. 247% equals 2 and 47 hundredths. 9 and 2 tenths percent equals 92 thousandths. Then when we're changing our decimals to percents, 5 hundredths equals 5%, 6 tenths equals 60%, 2 and 9 tenths equals 290%, 7 hundredths equals 7%, 386 thousandths equals 38 and 6 tenths percent. All right, let's just do a little bit more practice here to make sure you've got this under control, and just to really make sure we've got this here. I've got a matching activity here for you that I want you to try, and I want you to see if you can match the decimals that are in red to their equivalent percents. Take a minute and pause while you try it. All right, now that you've tried it, let's see if you were correct. Here are what your answers should be. And again, notice each time what you did each time is you moved your decimal 2 places to the left. And remember, whole numbers do have decimals in them. They're just all the way on the right-hand side. Let's try one more set here. Here I've got, well, actually it's 2 sets, but one more slide. Try changing these decimals into percents. Now that you've changed percents into decimals, try changing between percents and decimals. Try changing these decimals into percents and see what you get. All right, now that you've had a chance to try it, Let's see if you were correct. Here are what your correct answers should be. Again, every time you change a decimal to a percent, you're moving your decimal 2 places to the right. So hopefully, between what you've learned already this year about changing fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions, now you've added this piece about changing percents to decimals and decimals to percents, and you can also go back and forth between percents and fractions as well. All right, one more thing I want you to think about is what if we needed to put fractions and decimals in order? If we looked at some numbers, would you know how to put them in order? So I want you to take a look at these and see if you could put them in order from least to greatest. Now remember, think about what you're going to need to do. Can you just put the numbers in order the way they are? No, you can't do that. You're going to have to make them either all fractions, all decimals, or all percents, and then put them in order. So give it a try, see what you get. All right, now that you've tried it, here should be your solution. You should have put the 400ths first and then the 4/10ths, 45%, 75%, and 4/5. If you change them all to decimals, you would have had 400ths, 4/10ths, 4500ths, 7500ths, and 8/10ths or 80/100ths. All right, let's try one more of those and see if you can do that one. All right, take a look at these. Again, you're going to have to either change them all to fractions, all to decimals, or all to percents. Now, another thing you could do is you probably should look at and realize that the 3/5 and the 50% have to be your first two because those are the only two that are less than a whole. So you could look at those two and know that. And then you might look and say, well, I know 3/5 is more than half and 50% is exactly half. So you should know that 50% has to come first. So I've done the first two for you. See what you can do with the rest of it and try to get those in order. All right, so if you have those in correct order, you're going to have 50%, 3/5, 1 2/10, 1 1/4, and 150%. If you're able to change back and forth between fractions and decimals, then comparing them is really easy. Just change them all to the same form and compare them in that form. And just change them to whatever form is easiest for you is probably your best method for doing that.